Do you believe in setting boundaries, even if it means losing people?
You ever have one of those birthdays where even your own mother doesn't send a text? No call, no email, not even one of those fake Facebook, HBD, comments that she somehow manages to type under every photo of my sister posing with a cupcake and sparklers every single year. Just radio silence. And the worst part? It wasn't even the first time. For the last 10 years, maybe more, but I only started keeping count when it started to really hurt. They've managed to somehow forget my birthday. Every single time. And when I say they, I mean the people who raised me, who claim to love both of their daughters equally, who will swear up and down they never play favorites, and yet, every January 16th, when my phone stays cold and quiet and I eat takeout alone after work, their social media lights up just 2 weeks later with photos of my younger sister Jenny surrounded by balloons, candles, centerpieces, and the same damn steakhouse they swear they can't afford anymore. This year, it hit differently. I turned 43, and I don't know if it was the number or the weight of accumulated silence that finally broke something inside me, but I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even call to confront them like I've done in years past, that humiliating moment where I try to act surprised that no one remembered, just to hear one of them say, "Oh God, Monica, we're so sorry. We've just been so busy lately. You know we love you, right?" That phrase. You know we love you. As if love was a theory I'm supposed to trust without evidence. I sat there that morning with a lukewarm cup of coffee, looking out the same kitchen window I'd stared through since my divorce 2 years ago, and for once, I didn't try to justify it. I didn't say, well, Jenny's always been more social, more involved, or maybe Mom forgot because of her doctor's appointment last week. No, I just sat still. And then I opened my laptop, opened a new tab, and typed in one word, Tokyo. I'd never been. Not because I didn't want to, but because every time I tried to plan something big for myself, something always came up. A work project, or my parents' anniversary dinner that I was guilted into organizing, or Jenny's birthday brunch that somehow turned into a whole weekend getaway, which, funny enough, they never forgot to invite me to. Even though they always treated me like an afterthought once I was there. This time, though, no one could say I was needed. Because apparently I didn't even exist. Within 20 minutes, I had booked a first-class ticket departing 2 days later. I didn't ask anyone. I didn't tell anyone. I used the emergency savings I had quietly built up after the divorce, the one labeled for when I snap. Guess what? I snapped. The day of my flight, I packed one suitcase with everything I owned that didn't make me feel like someone else's background character, silk blouse I never wore, black heels I'd bought for an event Jenny ended up canceling, perfume I saved for when someone special comes along. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was going. The flight was quiet, peaceful in a way I'd forgotten existed. No one asking questions. No one complaining about allergies or trying to change the music. Just me, a glass of white wine, and the slow realization that I was finally doing something selfish. Not the petty kind of selfish, but the liberating kind. The kind where you stop begging for scraps from a table you were never invited to sit at in the first place. When I arrived, Tokyo felt like a clean slate. Cold, crisp January air, soft gray clouds draped over the city like a secret it wasn't quite ready to tell me. I checked into a hotel I'd only ever dreamed of, rooftop suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, a private balcony with a view that made me feel like I'd climbed out of the life I'd been trapped in. I didn't even unpack. I walked to the edge of the balcony, snapped a photo of the skyline with Mount Fuji sitting quiet in the distance, posted it to Instagram with no caption, no tags, just that one image. That was enough. Because they'd see it. I knew they'd see it. And sure enough, within hours, the digital silence broke. Not with a call, or a heartfelt message, or any kind of genuine curiosity. No. It started with a comment from my sister under the photo. Must be nice. 3 words. Dripping with that syrupy kind of passive aggression only Jenny could serve with a smile. A few minutes later, a message from Mom in the family group chat. Where are you? Is everything okay? Like she didn't know damn well what day it was. Like she hadn't already posted a memory on Facebook that morning of Jenny's birthday dinner from 2 years ago, the one with the live pianist and those ridiculous gold-rimmed glasses. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the chat. I just stared out at the city below me, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: stillness. The kind that isn't empty, but full, like the moment after a storm, when nothing moves and everything feels strangely clear. See, what they never understood is that forgetting someone's birthday isn't about the cake or the candles or the social media shout-out. It's about what you remember and what you choose not to. They remembered Jenny's every time, down to the theme and the guest list. And me? I was the oops, we'll make it up to you that never came. But this year, I didn't want them to remember. Not anymore. I wanted them to notice. And they did. And that was just the beginning. When I woke up the next morning, still wrapped in the soft down comforter of the hotel bed, the kind that smells faintly like new beginnings and overpriced laundry detergent, there was a strange calm hanging in the air, the kind of quiet that feels suspicious. Like a lull before something you can't quite name, and as the soft winter sunlight pushed through the floor-to-ceiling windows and spilled across the wood floors of the suite, I lay there for a long moment, blinking slowly, letting my mind float in that weightless space where no one is asking for anything, where no one is correcting your tone or questioning your plans, and for the first time in what felt like decades, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I poured myself a small cup of matcha from the in-room service tray, stood barefoot on the edge of the balcony with the hot ceramic mug cupped between both hands, and took in the view, Mount Fuji in the far distance, shrouded by a ribbon of fog. Silent and immense, the city slowly humming to life beneath it, like it knew exactly what it was and didn't need to prove it to anyone. That was the feeling I wanted, to be there without apology. Not performing, not explaining, not existing in the reflection of someone else's glow. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and without even checking, I knew what it would be. A part of me almost didn't want to look, wanted to just pretend that no one had noticed I was gone, to see if I could live in that illusion for another hour or two, but curiosity has always been my fatal flaw. The need to know how people respond when you stop playing the role they've quietly assigned you. So I checked. There were 2 messages in the family group chat. The first was from Mom. Where are you? Is everything okay? No mention of the photo. No mention of the fact that it was, in fact, still my birthday. Just the usual mixture of faux concern and strategic vagueness, a baited line she hoped I'd bite. The second message came a few minutes later from Jenny, who had commented under my rooftop photo with exactly the kind of performative sweetness I'd come to expect. Must be nice. 3 words that managed to carry a lifetime of insinuation, like a velvet-gloved slap, pretending to be admiration while brimming with unspoken judgment. And, suddenly, I was no longer standing on a quiet balcony in Tokyo. I was 12 again, sitting at the kitchen table, watching Jenny get a cake shaped like a carousel while I got a grocery store bundt cake with a candle stuck in it crooked, because Mom had forgotten to order the real one. I was 17, coming home from my part-time job to find out the family had gone out for dinner without me, because Jenny needed a night out after that stressful exam, and no one had thought to check my schedule. I was 26, watching Jenny open a jewelry box at Christmas with a gold necklace from Dad, while I got a fleece blanket with a tag still on it from Walgreens. It wasn't about things, it never was, it was about knowing, at a cellular level, that your presence is optional, your celebration conditional, your joy secondary. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't ready to give them the satisfaction of thinking they'd successfully reeled me back in. Instead, I slipped my phone into my coat pocket, left the hotel, and spent the rest of the day walking through quiet neighborhoods and tucked-away gardens, trying to find pieces of myself in a place where no one knew me well enough to expect anything. I visited a bookstore and bought a collection of translated poems by a Japanese writer I'd never heard of, simply because one of the lines caught my eye. The flower does not apologize to the tree it grows beside. I scribbled it on a napkin and kept it in my coat like a talisman. That afternoon, I received a string of text messages that almost made me laugh out loud in the middle of a ramen shop. One from Dad. Your mother is worried, you know. It's not like you to just disappear. As if that wasn't exactly what they'd trained me to do, to keep quiet, to accommodate, to smile and nod and disappear so that Jenny's space could be bigger. Another from Jenny, this time in private. Seriously, what's with the melodrama? You could have just said you didn't want to come this year. This year. As if I'd been a cherished guest in all the previous ones, instead of the obligatory afterthought they squeezed in at the end of the table. And here's the thing I need you to understand, it wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't sadness, either. It was something closer to grief, but colder. Like mourning a version of your life you finally realize never actually existed. I always thought if I just did enough, showed up enough, gave enough, proved myself enough, that eventually they'd see me. But the truth is, they saw exactly what they wanted to see, and they didn't want to see any more than that. Later that evening, I returned to the hotel, poured myself a glass of plum wine, and posted another photo. This time, it was me, seated at a sushi counter with the chef in the background, smiling warmly, the kind of smile you give someone when you feel seen. Still no caption. Just another small window into a life they weren't invited to this time. Within 15 minutes, another message came through, from Mom again. Well, if you're not in danger, can you at least stop posting photos like you're trying to make a point? That one I did reply to. I typed back, it's not a point, Mom. It's a life. Then I put my phone on silent. Now, here's where I ask you, the people listening, watching, silently forming your own opinions, do you think I should have said something before I left? Do you think I should have given them a chance to explain, to apologize, to promise it wouldn't happen again? Or is silence, sometimes, the clearest answer you can give? Would you have done what I did, or would you have stayed, waiting for people to remember something you never should have had to remind them of in the first place? Let me know. Because if I've learned anything so far, it's that everyone has a version of this story, some quiet little wound that only opens on holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, days where you're supposed to feel loved, and instead feel like an afterthought. And I think, maybe, I'm not the only one who got tired of waiting. And yet, even now, even after everything, I knew this wasn't the end. Because if there's one thing I've learned about family, it's that they don't stay quiet for long. And I had a feeling the next message wouldn't come in text. It'd come with pictures. Of a dinner table. Of Jenny. Of everyone smiling without me. But that was the plan. That was the point. Let them miss me if they can. There's something strangely intimate about watching people pretend you don't exist while simultaneously trying to signal that they wish you were there, not out of love or longing, but out of a sense of discomfort that your absence makes their curated image a little too uneven, a little too obviously constructed, like a picture frame that leans just a bit off center no matter how many times you nudge it. That was exactly the energy I felt when I opened Instagram on the evening of January 30th, 2 full weeks after my birthday, the date my family never forgets, because it belongs to Jenny and saw, without the slightest trace of surprise, that they had once again gone all out. It was a multi-slide post, of course, a perfect little carousel of passive-aggressive pageantry. The first image was Jenny in a floor-length red dress, standing in front of what I recognized immediately as the dining room at Maison Belle, an upscale restaurant they used to reserve for anniversaries and retirement parties back when they still pretended to watch their spending. Her makeup was perfect, her smile camera-ready, and the caption was classic Jenny, feeling so grateful for another beautiful trip around the sun, surrounded by the people who matter most. Beneath that were photos of the dinner table, meticulously set with gold cutlery, tall white taper candles, personalized name cards at each setting, including one with a floral border that read Aunt Cheryl in gold ink, which was a bit funny considering I hadn't seen Aunt Cheryl at a family function in over 3 years, but there, unmistakably, was her card and her beaming face in the fourth photo, laughing at something. Off camera, probably one of Jenny's dramatic reenactments of her disastrous workday. And in every photo, like a ghost's outline you almost think you imagined, there was a space, not physically empty, but spiritually vacant, where I should have been. They didn't mention me, not in the caption, not in the comments, not in the tags. But that omission, that sharp, calculated erasure, said more than any direct comment ever could. Because if I wasn't there and they didn't address it, then I became the problem. The one who disappeared. The one who ruined the picture, rather than the one who'd been left out of it long before she decided to walk away. I stared at those photos for a long time, longer than I care to admit. Not because I wanted to be there, not anymore, but because some old part of me still thought I'd find a sign, a glimpse of regret in someone's eyes, a missing fork where my plate should have been. A candid shot of someone glancing at the door like they hoped I'd walk through it at the last minute. But no. Everyone looked entirely at ease. They weren't missing me. They were performing happiness in my absence. It was seamless. Until the comment came. It was Jenny, of course. She had posted it under her own photo, as though it were some spontaneous thought she just couldn't keep to herself. Wish you were here, Monica. Hope you're okay. It would have looked sweet to anyone scrolling by, concerned, sisterly, even unless you'd grown up hearing that same sing-song voice weaponized in 1,000 other moments. Like the time she told our parents that I'd snuck out to see my boyfriend in high school when in reality, I'd just been sitting in the basement listening to music because I needed space, and she had claimed it was because she was worried about me. Or the time she accidentally mentioned to my ex-husband that I was thinking about switching jobs, something I told her in confidence, because I wasn't ready to talk about it yet, and her excuse had been, I just thought he should know in case it affected the mortgage. Her kindness was always sharp-edged, always designed to cut while making it look like she was offering a hand. So I didn't reply. Instead, I posted a single image, a table for one, lacquered wood reflecting the delicate arrangement of sushi, a small carafe of sake, and behind it, the quiet hush of the Tokyo skyline just after dusk. The caption this time was not left blank. I wrote, simply, the best birthday I've had in years. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't name anyone. But within 10 minutes, the message had been received. Jenny's private message came through first, and it was as predictable as it was pathetic. Wow. Real mature. No punctuation, just those 3 words, as though she'd typed them quickly, like swatting at a fly, more irritated than hurt. That was her way, deny the wound and go straight for the deflection. But what caught me off guard was what followed, not from her, but from someone I hadn't heard from in almost 3 years. It was a video message, which felt like an unusual choice, and for a second I hesitated, unsure if I even wanted to open it. The name on the notification made my stomach tighten. Greg. My ex-husband. The man I'd spent 11 years building a life with, only for him to decide, not long after we hit our 10th anniversary, that he needed more space to find himself, a phrase so vague and cliched that it still makes my skin crawl. I'd buried his contact, ignored his birthday, erased the scent of him from my sheets, or so I thought. But there he was, now, in a paused thumbnail, looking older, grayer around the temples, the same sad smile tugging at his lips that used to mean he was about to say something he knew I wouldn't want to hear. I waited, took a breath, and hit play. Hey, he said, his voice just slightly hoarse, like he'd rehearsed this and gotten it wrong a few times before trying again. I saw your post. Tokyo looks incredible. I'm glad you're doing something for yourself. You always talked about going. He paused, looked off camera for a second, then back. Listen, this might be a weird thing to say, and I know it's been a long time, but I saw Jenny last week. She invited me to her birthday dinner. That stopped me cold. She said you weren't coming, he continued, and when I asked why, she said something about how your family had always done their best, but you were just difficult. That you had a history of pulling away when things didn't go your way. He looked directly into the camera then, and for a moment, I could see something flicker in his face, shame, maybe, or realization. She said your parents only ever had one real daughter worth investing in. And that, honestly, that hit me. Because I think she's been telling them that story for years. And I think maybe I bought it too. I closed the message before it finished. Not because I didn't want to hear the rest, but because I already knew what was coming. Apologies. Regret. Maybe a hint that he missed me. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Because what mattered was this. I hadn't been imagining it. The favoritism. The manipulation. The slow, insidious erosion of my place in that family. Jenny wasn't just the favorite, she was the narrator. She wrote the version of me that they all believed. And I had spent a lifetime living inside someone else's fiction. But now? Now I was writing my own. And chapter 1 was dinner for one in Tokyo, where nobody forgot my name. There is a very specific kind of silence that follows a confession, not the kind that immediately offers catharsis or peace, but the kind that stretches long and uneasy, like standing in a room just after someone has broken a window. You're not hurt, but you're aware of the cold air flooding in and of the fact that things are no longer intact. That was exactly how I felt after watching Greg's video message, sitting cross-legged on the edge of a massive hotel bed that suddenly felt too big, too indulgent, too far removed from the messy, unfinished truth that had just been placed in my lap like a file of sealed evidence I wasn't supposed to see. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just let the phone screen dim into black, resting face down on the comforter, as if turning it over might also flip the emotional weight upside down and somehow make it lighter. I knew Greg hadn't sent that video to hurt me, although if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I would have told you that hurting me was something he'd perfected to an art. But this time, this moment, it didn't feel like cruelty. It felt like guilt, delayed and unresolved, the kind that comes knocking long after the damage is done, hoping it's not too late to be let in. And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, it wasn't his betrayal that burned the most. It was the casual, almost practiced way Jenny had dismissed me, once again, not just as an inconvenience, but as a fundamentally broken thing unworthy of concern or credibility. I poured myself another glass of plum wine, even though the last one hadn't exactly gone down smoothly, and stood at the window, watching the city flicker below like a circuit board, each tiny square of light representing a life, a story, a dinner, a conversation not steeped in bitterness. I thought about how easy it must have been for Jenny to twist the narrative. After all, I was never loud. I never interrupted. I didn't make scenes or storm out of rooms. I just disappeared, quietly and without protest, the same way I always had during holidays, after arguments, in the middle of shared vacations where I'd end up alone on the beach while everyone else went on group excursions. And when someone disappears quietly, it's remarkably easy to replace them with a version that better suits your story. But what I hadn't expected, not even in my most cynical imaginings, was that Jenny had been curating this version of me for years, feeding it like a houseplant, gently and deliberately, shaping my reputation in small, subtle ways that made it possible for others, even people I'd trusted, to believe that maybe I was just difficult. Difficult. Such a polite little dagger of a word, not dramatic, not unstable, not broken, just difficult enough to explain why people stopped inviting me, stopped including me, stopped asking if I was okay. I picked up the phone again, not to respond to Greg, not yet, but to scroll back through old family messages, to really look at all the moments where something had felt off and I had convinced myself I was overreacting. There they were, the group photo from Thanksgiving 2 years ago, where I had taken the picture because no one thought to include me, the thread of messages planning Jenny's engagement party that I'd been added to 2 days before the event, the Christmas where I received a pair of slippers and Jenny got plane tickets to Paris, and somehow, when I mentioned the difference, I was the one accused of making things uncomfortable. I should have felt vindicated, I suppose, finally seeing the pattern not as paranoia but as a deliberate architecture. But mostly I just felt tired. Not physically, emotionally. Tired of being the one who notices. Tired of the effort it takes to keep pretending things might one day change. And just as I was reaching for the remote to dull the ache with some mindless Japanese television, my phone rang. Not a text. Not a video. A real call, the screen lighting up with a name I hadn't seen in years, Uncle Bill. Now, Uncle Bill isn't technically my uncle, not by blood anyway. He was my dad's best friend from college. The kind of figure who showed up at holidays with scratch-off tickets and crude jokes and who used to sneak me quarters for the arcade machine in the corner of the old pizza place we used to go to before Jenny decided we were too grown up for that. He was loud, inappropriate, and mostly ignored by my mother, but he was the only adult in my childhood who ever asked how I was really doing and then waited for the answer. So when I saw his name, something in me shifted. I answered. "Mon," he said, his voice crackling with static and age. "I saw your photos. Looked like you were finally breathing for once." I smiled, despite myself. "I guess I am." There was a pause, longer than necessary, and then he said, "Look, I probably should have said something years ago, but it wasn't my place. I thought your parents would have told you by now. Hell, I thought Jenny might have slipped up by accident." My heart slowed. "Told me what?" "Jenny's adopted," he said, not unkindly, but like he'd been holding onto the words for too long and didn't know how to cushion the landing. "They took her in when you were about 4. Her birth mom was a distant cousin of your dad's, died in a car accident. They never told anyone, not officially. They thought it would complicate things." I sat down, hard, the wind knocked clean out of me. "What are you talking about?" "They didn't treat her like an outsider," he said quickly. "That wasn't the issue. If anything, it went the other way. They overcompensated. Made excuses for everything. And the thing is, Jenny always knew. They told her when she was 10. Said she was special. Said she needed extra attention, extra understanding. But they never told you, because they said you were mature enough to handle not knowing. Imagine that. Like the truth was something you'd be fine without." For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of the city outside and the rush of blood in my ears. Everything tilted. All those years of subtle, inexplicable unfairness, all the times I'd been made to feel like I was imagining things suddenly made sense. I hadn't been losing my mind. I'd been living in a story where I wasn't meant to ask questions. "You okay?" Bill asked softly. "No," I said, not out of anger, but out of clarity. "But I will be." After we hung up, I sat in silence, letting the reality settle in. It wasn't that Jenny had stolen anything from me, it was that she had been handed the script and given full control of the edits. She got the applause, the attention, the grace, and I got the uncredited role, the one expected to keep the peace without knowing the plot. I opened my photo gallery and found an old picture of me at age 7, standing in front of a sparkler cake, wearing a paper crown someone had picked up from the dollar store, grinning with missing teeth and sticky fingers. It was the last birthday I remembered where everyone looked at me like I mattered. I posted it. Caption: "This was the last time I remember feeling like I was the main character. I was 7. No one replied. But I knew they'd seen it. And next, someone was going to have to say something. There are moments in a person's life that do not arrive with fireworks or loud declarations, but instead slip in quietly, like a draft beneath a closed door, unnoticed until the entire room begins to feel colder than it used to, and in those moments, the world does not explode or collapse in cinematic drama, but rather, it rearranges itself in small, irreversible ways, until everything you thought you knew feels misaligned, unfamiliar, and permanently altered. That's what it felt like in the hours after I ended the call with Uncle Bill, as I sat in the rooftop suite, watching the final light of the day stretch across the skyline like a slow exhale from the sky itself, and realized that the story I had been told about my own family, the one I had tried to fix, repair, forgive, and understand for over 40 years, had never been the truth to begin with. The weight of the revelation didn't crush me immediately, nor did it send me into hysterics, because the human mind has this remarkable ability to delay emotional combustion when survival is at stake. Instead, it all came in layers, like peeling wallpaper to discover there had been water damage hidden underneath all along, long before the cracks started to show on the surface. Jenny was adopted. She had known. My parents had known. Even Uncle Bill had known. And I had been the only one in the family portrait who had been posed and positioned without being told what the backdrop really was. It explained so much, and yet it explained nothing in the way that would make the hurt easier to carry. Yes, it made the pattern clearer, the overindulgence, the careful coddling, the endless excuses, the gentle corrections every time Jenny had been cruel or selfish or manipulative, all brushed off as quirks or emotional complexity. And yes, it gave context to my mother's exhausting tightrope walk between denial and defensiveness, or my father's way of disappearing into silence whenever things became uncomfortable. But what it did not do, and could never do, was fix the core wound, which was not about Jenny's status as adopted or not, but about how willingly they had allowed me to be cast as the strong one, the resilient one, the one who would understand being overlooked because she had no reason to complain. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call them because something inside me, something quiet and final, understood that they would not give me the truth if I asked. They hadn't for over 40 years. They wouldn't start now. Instead, I checked out of the hotel early the next morning, not because I wanted to leave Tokyo, but because the room had served its purpose. It had been my sanctuary, my private theater of rebellion, my place to say nothing and still be heard, and now, I didn't need to stand in silence anymore. I took a cab to a small ryokan on the edge of the city, where the air was cleaner and the voices of other people didn't echo through the walls, and I spent the day walking, eating, thinking, breathing. All of the things I had always done in the cracks between other people's demands, but never as my own priority. And then, later that night, just as I was preparing to turn in, another comment came through. Not a private message, not a text, but a public response to the photo I had posted of my 7-year-old self. It was from Jenny. No emojis, no apologies, just this. You never asked why. You just ran. I stared at it for a long time, rereading it over and over, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I wanted to fully absorb the audacity of what she was suggesting. That my decision to step away from a family dynamic that had long ago abandoned my dignity was somehow a failure on my part to dig deeper, to extract from her the justification for years of lopsided affection and silent hostility. It was a classic Jenny move, veiled in vulnerability, but soaked in accusation, as if I was supposed to apologize for finally choosing myself. I didn't respond. Not directly. What I did instead was open my notes app and write a message to no one in particular, a kind of diary entry, or maybe a speech I would never give, something for me, and maybe, someday, for the version of me that had stayed too long, kept too quiet, and waited too patiently. I was never afraid of the truth, I wrote. I was afraid that the truth would confirm what I already suspected, that love, in my family, had always come with qualifiers. That affection was conditional. That loyalty only applied to the one they'd chosen to protect. And that I was never really chosen at all. I didn't post it. I just let it sit there, glowing on my screen like a small lamp in a dark room. And then I booked a flight, not back home, not to the city where my apartment waited like an empty glove, not to the place where my parents would pretend nothing had happened and ask me if I'd gotten the Tokyo thing out of my system. And certainly not to the sister who believed my silence was an act of avoidance rather than the final stage of clarity. No, I booked a flight to San Francisco, a city I had loved in theory but never visited, because there was always a reason not to go: a birthday, a gathering, a holiday I was expected to attend but never celebrated. This time, I wasn't waiting for permission. As I boarded the plane and watched the lights of Tokyo fade beneath the clouds, I felt something lift, not completely, but enough to breathe, enough to let the tension in my shoulders dissolve just a fraction. I didn't know what waited for me on the other side. I didn't know if this was reinvention or just escape. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would not be the same woman when I landed. Because the truth had not set me free in the way people often promise it will. It had unsettled me, unmoored me, forced me to accept that the people who had built my foundation had done so unevenly, with missing beams and false floors. But still, I was standing. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was trying to be real. Maybe they would continue posting curated photos, throwing polished dinners, pretending their version of the family remained whole. Maybe Jenny would continue writing her version of events, the one where I was the difficult one, the one who left, the one who never asked why. And maybe some of the people in our orbit would believe her. But I no longer needed to be believed. I only needed to be awake. And as I leaned back into the seat, eyes closing, breath steady, I whispered to myself, not as a promise, but as a reminder, I wasn't forgotten. I was finally remembered. By me.